This is a Kirkendall Barrett presentation, darling. Well, hello everybody. It is your favorite day of the week. Another day of a lifetime of Hallmark. I am Les Kirkendall Barrett. Hello, Jason Bowers.
Hello, Les Kirkendall Barrett.
And hello, Kurt Fitzpatrick.
Hello, Les Kirkendall Barrett, and hello, Jason Bowers.
We take movies from both Lifetime and the Hallmark Channel and try to make sense of them.
We're not very successful, though, because they don't often make sense, but they are fun to watch.
And we go down all kinds of rabbit holes. We talk about Angelian quite a bit. We talk about the show Enos.
June Squibb. We are team June Squibb all the way.
And we have Black China news every single episode.
So with that in mind, why don't you listen to a lifetime of Hallmark? You can listen wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Well, hello everybody. This is Les, and I love soaps. And I'm back. I had a lot going on. I adopted a kid. I was in a show, I had some other things going on, so I basically took the summer off. But I'm back, everybody, and I'm here to talk about our favorite soaps, both in the US and the UK. So I am starting the second week of September, so fasten your seatbelts because we've got a lot of soap-tastic stuff to talk about. So remember, this is Les, and I love soaps, and you can find me anywhere that you can get podcasts. See ya! Well, hello everybody. It is your favorite day of the week. It is time for another episode of the Reality Reading Rainbow, where we talk about books by your favorite reality stars, particularly those from Bravo, and try to make sense of them. I am one of your hosts, Les Kirkendall Barrett. Your other host, Victoria Wood, is actually doing a little traveling this week, so she will not be with us. So it's just you and I. And we are still talking about the book by Dorinda from The Real Housewives of New York. And the book is called Make It Nice. And so this is part 2. We are on chapter 4. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? Because I always forget this. So I'm going to do this now and get it out of the way. So first of all, this podcast has a Patreon. So if you have a couple of spare bucks, reading these books does cost money, but, I get it. We're all going through rough times right now. So, you know what? If you have a couple of bucks and you feel like throwing some into our Patreon, the Patreon is called The Reality Reading Rainbow. And I'm in the process now of revamping it and, I'm going to do a real little revamp, and I'm going to put some fun tiers and stuff on that. So, if you got a couple of bucks, even a buck or two, you could throw it in. That'd be great. If you don't, that's fine too. I just want your listens because remember, your presence is our present. Also, we have a Facebook page and it is called The Reality Reading Rainbow. So why don't you join our Facebook page as well? And last but not least, I am always open. We are always open to suggestions. Some of the best books that I've read on this podcast so far were listener suggestions. My favorite book so far has been The House of Hilton. That was a listener suggestion. The Danielle Stout book, that was a listener suggestion. So please, if you suggest books, we will read them. Now, anyway, back to Dorinda. So as I was saying, we are now on chapter 4 of Dorinda's book. And this is where Dorinda talks about how she met and married her first husband, Ralph Lynch. So she starts off by talking about her first date with her first husband. So he picks her up in a town car. Now, at this time, Dorinda was still struggling in New York. She could barely afford cab fare. And she, shared an apartment with a bunch of people. And then here's this guy picking her up in a town car. So then the thing that fascinated her the most is while they were in the town car, there was actually a phone. So yes, this was many, many, many years before the cell phone came into existence, back when having a phone in your car was a huge, huge deal. So that really impressed her. And so he takes Dorinda out to this fancy dinner. She, in turn, takes him out to her favorite Irish pub, and hijinks ensued. They had fun, and they became this couple. It was definitely an adjustment to her because, like I said, she was still up and coming. So, she was still having, struggling to pay the rent and just, struggling to live in New York. So this was like a nice thing for her. He worked for Lehman Brothers. He was a banker. And so they're dating for a while. Then he gets a job offer in Hong Kong. And so he invites her to move to Hong Kong with him. And so when Dorinda tells her parents, her mom's like, well, you can't move with this guy unless you're engaged. So he and Dorinda, Ralph and Dorinda, became engaged. She moved to Hong Kong. It was definitely a new experience to her because she had never lived outside of the country before. So she moved to Hong Kong, and even though she enjoyed living in Hong Kong, she was still lonely, and this is something, my personal experience. My dad worked for the Department of Defense, so my family lived overseas a lot. And so I grew up as an expat myself. And so I could relate to the part where she's talking about how, you moved to this different country, but it's a little lonely for you because not only do you have the adjustment of making friends, you still have to adjust to a whole new way of living as well. And having been through this myself, personally, I could relate to this 100%. But, Dorinda and Dorinda Fashion talked about how, she just got in there and she made it a point to get to know the lay of the land and get to know Hong Kong. It was definitely more of an adjustment for her because, she went from struggling in New York to now having people, having housekeepers and gardeners and people who took care of their household. And basically she went from struggling in New York to now having a staff that works for her. But, Dorinda is sort of a down home lady. She's down with the people. So this definitely was an adjustment for her as well. Her husband, like I said, worked for Lehman Brothers. So that was another issue, is he worked a lot of long hours. And so that kind of got into the relationship as well because she wanted him home more. But he worked long, crazy hours during the week. And then on the weekends, he wouldn't want to do anything because he was tired. So, that's when she started to learn things on her own and started venturing on her own. But still, she was just extremely lonely, couldn't break through it. And so then they decide, they eventually get married. And so they get married back in her old neighborhood in the Berkshires. And so she talks about how she worked at the Red Lion Inn, which we've actually seen on the show because the ladies on Real Housewives of New York went to the Red Lion Inn. And she said that Dorinda said that the people who owned the Red Lion Inn also owned this castle. And she'd always wanted to get married in this castle. And so, but it was very expensive, and her parents insisted on paying for it. So what Dorinda said that she did behind their backs is she went to the owners and she told the owners, listen, I can guarantee that I can fill this place. So if I fill the place, can I get a deal on the actual space? Which the people, really liked Dorinda. She was a good employee for them. They really liked her. So they actually worked that deal out with her. So she did indeed end up getting married in that castle. So then she and her husband, her now husband, Ralph, moved to London. And so, London was definitely very fascinating to her. So they first moved to this real posh neighborhood where people had, they went to parties where people had butlers, and this was definitely another adjustment for Dorinda because, she just grew up like this lower middle class kid. And so, so it was also kind of lonely for her because she felt that definitely no matter what she did, she was kind of on the outside looking in. And so then Dorinda talks about how there were these groups of posh people, but she felt more comfortable making friends with the housekeepers and the people that worked at her shops and like the fishmongers and all that stuff. That's who Dorinda felt the most comfortable making friends with and hanging out with. So basically in her neighborhood, she did become popular in the neighborhood with all of the people that worked in the neighborhood. And I could totally see that. And if you watch the show, you could definitely see that too. And I could see Dorinda like walking down the street going, "Hey, Albert. Hey, Tiffany," talking to all, like on, did you guys ever see Beauty and the Beast? At the beginning of Beauty and the Beast where Belle is walking down the street going, "Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour." I could see Dorinda doing that too. So, initially, her and Ralph lived in this real posh, highfalutin neighborhood where Dorinda didn't feel comfortable. And so she talked her husband into moving to this Italian neighborhood instead. And the Italian neighborhood was called the Boltons. And so, because she said initially the neighborhood that they lived in was Belgravia, where she didn't feel comfortable. And so they then moved to the Boltons, where she did feel comfortable. And she said, like she moved in, she befriended one of her neighbors who was the descendant of Lord Alfred. And so this woman was like really cool. She was an older woman. She took Dorinda under her wing. She made a date with Dorinda, every Saturday, the first Wednesday of every month, come up, we're going to have tea. And so Dorinda definitely felt more at home in that neighborhood. So then she talks about this other friend of hers named Anne. And so she says that how she met Anne was one day her and Ralph were taking a walk, and they see this really nice townhouse. And her husband was like, "So my boss lives in this townhouse and, he's married and stuff, but do not go and knock on that door. Leave them alone. Don't go bug them." So the next day, Dorinda says she goes and she knocks on the door, and the boss's wife answers the door, and the boss's wife, Anne, ends up becoming one of her best friends. As a matter of fact, she said that Anne, when Dorinda's daughter, Hannah, was born, Anne was like the first person to bathe her. And so her and Anne created this close bond. Dorinda also says that while she was in the UK, she took etiquette classes. because she feels that etiquette is very important. And I wrote here in my notes, I was like, oh, she took etiquette classes. Well, this is where Dorinda learned how to make it nice. And she talks about how she took the etiquette classes and she actually really enjoyed them. But she still, even though she was doing all this stuff, she still was feeling lonely, right? The Italian neighborhood did make her feel better, but she still was feeling lonely, and so and then during this time she discovers that she's pregnant, right? So she's going through her pregnancy, and so she's a little bored as well. So she decided to start teaching aerobics, and so she went to the council houses to teach aerobic at the council houses. Now, what the council houses are, here in America, you would call the council houses public housing. But here's the deal. So my husband is British, and in the UK, when we were in the UK, we stayed at an Airbnb, which was actually in a council. And I got to tell you, for public housing, the actual council houses that we stayed in actually weren't bad. And, for living in the States and seeing public housing, it didn't look like what we would think was public housing here. I mean, to me, the council houses basically just looked like living in Hollywood, like living in Hollywood proper. But it actually is public housing. So what she would do, because Dorinda said she did, she felt more comfortable around like people in the public housing anyway, and these were more of her people. So she set up this aerobics class, and she would go a few days a week and like charge like £5, which was nothing. That's like $5. She would charge like probably these days it's probably like a tiny bit over $5, but not much, so not expensive. So she would go to the council and she would teach like weekly aerobics classes. And she said the aerobic classes were very popular. And the women in the council houses, would take the class, and they took to Dorinda as much as Dorinda took to them. And so like she would give a class, and then they would invite her to their homes. And so she actually made friends with these women. And she said at the time that, she was getting more pregnant and more pregnant. As a matter of fact, she said that Hannah actually was over 9 months pregnant with Hannah when Hannah was born. Because she said this was before the time that like they induced pregnancies and stuff, unless it was an emergency. Like if it was an emergency, they wouldn't induce it. So one of the stories that I found interesting about this time was when Dorinda said that she was teaching aerobics at the council house, and every time that she would show up, she had her regulars, and so she was known there. So she said every time she would show up, there was this guy that would be waiting for her to like help her out with her gear. And, she didn't think anything of it because she was pregnant at the time. So she thought the guy was basically just being a gentleman by helping her out with her stuff. But she said that the guy really creeped her out. And she said the guy really creeped her out so much that she started showing up late, like right before class started, so she wouldn't have to spend time with him. And so then it turned out that she said one day she's teaching her class in Scotland. She's teaching her class, and Scotland Yard shows up and arrests the guy. And the guy turned out to be a serial killer, the Wadsworth killer. And so she said that Scotland Yard told her that this guy was probably stalking her. And so he was probably leading up to actually kill her. So yes, our friend Dorinda Medley was almost not our friend because she almost fell victim to a serial killer. I was going to say fun fact, but I don't know. Is it a fun fact? Well, I guess it is kind of fun, you know. But anyway, so that's why she quit teaching aerobics, because her husband was like, no, you need to stop. So she quits teaching aerobics, but then at the end of the chapter, she goes into labor. But she said what happened is she'd gone to a party. She'd gone to like an afternoon party, like a luncheon, and she started feeling weird. But she said like she started feeling weird and she got heartburn. But she initially thought that it was basically, since she was at a luncheon and eating, she basically thought that it was something she ate. Well, it wasn't something she ate. It was a baby. So she ends the chapter with her going into labor. And that was it. So Victoria is going to be back for the next episode. And like I said, don't forget about our Patreon, The Reality Reading Rainbow, if you are so inclined. Don't forget about our Facebook page, The Reality Reading Rainbow on Facebook. Oh, you know what I forgot to mention? We also have an email. So shoot us off an email with your listener suggestions at therealityreadingrainbow@gmail.com. And you know what? I believe that's it. So until next time, readers, keep reading. Bye. And Victoria's going to be back next week. Bye.